वेलकम बैक टू जी कंपेनियन योर स्टोरी। मैं हूं कनिका। आज हमारे स्टूडियो में एक बहुत ही खास मेहमान आए हुए हैं, सनी एंजल, हु इज़ अ ब्रेव सर्वाइवर ऑफ सेक्सुअल ग्रूमिंग, रेप एंड वायलेंस। थोड़ी ही देर में हम लाइंस खोलेंगे। अगर आप अपनी कोई स्टोरी हमारे साथ शेयर करना चाहते हैं, कहीं गलत आपके साथ हुआ है, दिस इज़ योर अपॉर्चुनिटी टू शेयर इट विद अस। और अगर आप ब्रेव सनी से कुछ सवाल पूछना चाहते हैं, कुछ गाइडेंस चाहते हैं, आप हमें कॉल कर पाएंगे। बस थोड़ी देर रुकिए। सनी, कितने ही पेरेंट्स को ग्रूमिंग के बारे में पता भी नहीं होगा कि बिकॉज इट्स अ ट्रैप वेर इन द प्रीडेटर विक्टिम को तो तंग कर ही रहे हैं, परिवार को भी तंग कर रहे हैं। सो और कल्चरली अनफॉर्चुनेटली सो मेनी ऑफ द एशियन पेरेंट्स डिसाइड कि नहीं भैया हमारी बेटी के साथ गलत हो गया, कोई बात नहीं, बात नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि हमारी बदनामी होगी, विच इज़ so wrong, but it happens. Now, how do you think we can practically change those mindsets so that they start acting on it and not hush crowing it?
I think the more people, families talk together, and instead of fear and control, we have love and compassion for our children. That's the first step. Like, there's so much going on at the moment with the Me Too campaign globally.
Bilkul.
You know, if we could just start talking enough in our family and say, Me Too, come on mum, dad, we need to talk about this. They should see our children, you know, as humans, not as objects.
अगर ये माइंडसेट चेंज नहीं हुए तो कितना नुकसान हो सकता है? सनी की जिंदगी के बारे में हमने बहुत कुछ देखा, सीखा। टेक अ लुक।
After the hotel, things had got really bad at home. It just escalated. Mum and Dad were really bad with me. My brothers weren't speaking to me, and Khan began to threaten more and more. So what I did was I went to the police and I told them what was happening. They installed a panic alarm. They knew that he was dangerous and he'd been violent against other people and that there were other victims. So what happened was there was a panic alarm button installed in my bedroom because my view from my window I could see the whole street. And what happened was one morning Mum was threatening to take my passport and take me to India. Whether she was going to marry me off or not I didn't know, but I was so vulnerable and nobody was talking to me in the house. There was no communication. Nobody was listening to me. I just was so upset. So when Mum went to grab my passport, I didn't want to fight her, so I just pressed the alarm, hoping that when the police came, everybody will see sense and we can sit down and talk as adults, because I was like 18 at this point, and I just wanted someone to hear me, to talk. I just needed some support. The police came rushing in looking for Khan. Khan wasn't there, and Dad refused me to take my clothes, and the police asked me what was going to happen now. I said I wanted my passport because I was worried that my parents were going to send me away because I didn't know them anymore. You know, it was like they're not my family. It was like they were happy to just get rid of me because of just honour. They were happy to just for a community that hadn't done anything for them. And I was desperate to save them from harm. I told the police what Khan was doing, how he was threatening me. They'd seen the missed calls, the answer phone messages of how he was threatening my mum and dad. You know, just 2 days earlier, he'd threatened to throw my mum off the balcony in the shopping centre. They'd recorded all these calls, so they knew that the threat was real. It wasn't just make-believe. They knew the threat was there. So I'd said I'd just happily take a bunch of clothes and I'd go alone, you know. I'll go and sleep in a car park somewhere because I wasn't allowed my own car. My dad refused to give me any of my clothes, which I'd paid for. So the police could see there was a problem. And they said now, because I'm technically an adult at 18, nobody could stop me. So it was a really, really sad scene. Mum was just shouting. Dad was just cross with me. So I left. I was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. And I remember Khan ringing. He was rang the first 3 times, I ignored it. The 5th call, I ignored it. The 6th time, I was just wandering aimlessly. I didn't really know where I was. The 6th call I took, he was swearing and he said, I don't know where you are. Your mum's called me. And he said, why did you leave? I'm coming to get you. When he got me, he started smashing my head on the car. And he said, what do you think you're doing? Why did you leave? Where are you going? And he says, your parents say you're dead to them now. I'm here. And then I stayed in his car for several nights. I was really, really scared, and he locked me up, and then he would move the car from one place to another. And I remember looking at that phone until the battery died, and there was nobody I could call. I just kept crying all night, thinking, why won't my family call me? And at this point, I still hadn't slept with him. I hadn't had any sexual contact with him at all. So having spent several nights in the car alone, I started to get really bad kidney infections. So I was bleeding. I had all sorts of problems. I went back and forward to hospital. The abuse just escalated and escalated. Khan started getting violent because he was getting calls from my parents, from the police. I was reported as missing because I was missing from my workplace. I was dressing differently. I hadn't eaten. He started bruising me on my face, and then he took me over to Shearwater, which was close to Woking, because I needed somewhere where I could sleep properly and go to the toilet, because people had spotted the car. So he kept moving it, but people could see locally that there was someone sleeping in the car and kept reporting it. So his car was then tagged as that there's someone sleeping in there. So, that became a problem for him. He then took me to a place, and I actually began to trust him to a point where I could actually close my eyes and sleep. I had no idea what he was going to do next. Going in, I didn't have any clothes, just the clothes I was wearing and the clothes that he had made up for me, like salwar kameez and hijab. And he said, no one's going to know us here. It's going to be a new start for us as husband and wife. So he says, you're going to have to start cleaning the place. And he says, I'm going to go out to work. When I come back, I want it spotless. So we started to do more of a control rather than being the nice person he is. And the special stuff started to go almost very quickly. And then in the evening, he had some sort of drink and drug party. And I wasn't invited. He just had me to the side behind a beaded partition on the bed. And again, I needed to go to the toilet because I had really bad kidney infections and I was on antibiotics. And I needed to go to the bathroom, I needed to go to the kitchen, which meant I had to go through the lounge, which was a one-bedroom flat. And he wouldn't allow me to go past. He said I wasn't allowed to make any noise. And as I was trying to get his attention, he actually screamed at everybody and told them to get out. As everyone was leaving, he grabbed me. I was really, really scared. I didn't know what he was going to do. His eyes were bloodshot red, and I just immediately started apologizing, just kept saying, I'm sorry, I don't know what I've done, but I'm sorry. I said, I just wanted to go to the toilet. I said, I kept asking for your permission. I was ever so scared. And he just carried on screaming. I didn't actually understand what he was saying. He was just screaming in my face, and all I could remember was his face was just anger, absolute anger. So he carried on pinning me against the wall, screaming and shouting. I tried to wrestle with him, and then he went off. He said sorry, he went off, but I just sensed that it wasn't over. There was nobody I could call to help. I even thought of calling my parents, and I thought there's just nobody I could go to. I thought of running out, but I didn't know where I was. I didn't know my location. All I knew was I was in Shearwater. I didn't know the number of the flat or the road I was in. I tried to move away from him. I tried to edge closer to the door, but I didn't even have any shoes on. I didn't have anything on me, and he grabbed me again. He threw me onto the bed, and he was just really, really violent, and he started to rape me. It was the first time that he raped me, and I just felt really dirty. I was crying. I kept begging him to stop. And there were so many things that were flashing through my mind. The rape when I was a child, everything was flashing. Things of like, why isn't God stopping Khan from doing this? Why won't Khan stop? Things of like, why didn't my parents believe me? Why didn't they stop this from happening? And I kept thinking, why did he gain my trust? What was it that he wanted from me? Was it just the money he wanted, or was I just, you know, another one of his victims? I couldn't understand, why did the police not stop him? You know, there were so many questions going through my mind. I was in absolute pain and agony. And then when he finally finished, he threw me off. I was covered in scars, and in the morning he didn't realise what he'd done. I couldn't understand how he could not remember. He said he'd done too much drink and drugs, and that he doesn't remember. When he looked at me, I was covered in scars, there was blood on the wall, he'd bit my ear, he'd torn at me. I was so frightened, absolutely frightened, and we still had a few more days left of staying in that place. He was getting phone calls on my mobile, and it was my dad ringing about a Hoven ceremony that they wanted to do because they believed I was cursed with black magic or something. Khan found it funny. He actually found it funny. He said, well, I think you're pregnant now, so, you know, you're going to go to this Hoven. And I said, I'm not going. But he still dropped me back off at my parents' house, but I was too ashamed. On the way there, he stopped off at a payphone and he said, your parents have reported you missing, and you're going to have to ring the police and say you're not missing because they're looking for your dead body under other people's floorboards. And he said, you know, you've become a problem to me now. And he said, now I've done this with you, I can have sex with you any time. And I was like, well, if this is what sex is, I don't want it. I don't want to do this. So I didn't realise the difference between sex and rape. You know, it was painful. I didn't want it. So once he dropped me back off at my parents' house, it wasn't nice. I didn't want to go. I wanted to go alone. I wanted to have my own life, my own way, but Khan was watching me. He waited until my parents opened the front door, so I had nowhere else to go. He wouldn't let me go anywhere else. After Mum and Dad opened the door, I stayed there possibly another few days or a week, and things got worse and worse. I couldn't really tell them about my rape because they'd already thought I'd slept with him before it ever happened, and I had no one to speak to. I had no support. And then what had happened was Khan had got me out the house again, and this time he held me captive and had me into a torture home where he'd given me more punishment and had me locked up, and he put cigarette burns on my back, whip marks. He had me tied up with rope. He didn't feed me. He had me locked in without light, without heating. He'd keep me there for days. And we moved out of the Surrey area, so we were in another police area, so the police couldn't find me. And then he'd sometimes go to Birmingham. He'd put me in the boot of a car. He'd often threatened to cut me up. He'd mark my body with a black marker pen and say he'd cut my pieces up, and he'd give my leg to my mum, and other body parts he'd hide around different areas like their shed and give them presents for Diwali, Christmas and things like that. It was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. He'd rape me on a daily basis, and in a horrifying, torturing way. There was one particular day when Princess Diana passed away, and in the early hours, Khan just went absolutely berserk. Sitting there next to him, he smashed a bowl and plate and glass, and it went flying everywhere, and he was screaming at me to pick it up, and then he smashed it on my back. And even 20 years later, I still bear the scars on my back. He'd show me items from other victims, and he'd show me how he made me feel special, and then he'd show me his stalking items, like someone else's photos. He'd tell me how I was his 9th virgin. So I knew there were other victims out there, and that's what made me feel like I wish someone had listened, because there's so many other people that are suffering, and to hide it all behind the banner of honour it's not doing anybody any help. There's other people that are suffering out there, and it's taken me 20 years of therapy and self-healing to come to terms with it. I'm actually still get, flashbacks and things now. Even just talking about it, the scenes are still in my head, but by sharing my story out there now, I know that there's other victims of all sorts of things, especially grooming, and I just hope that we can help each other, especially within our families.
I don't know what to say, पर कहते हैं कि it's not about what happens to you, it's about what you do about it. And कि मैं कहना चाहूँगी सनी मिसाल है कि चुप रहने से कुछ नहीं होता. अगर कुछ गलत हो रहा है तो बोलिए, तभी वो गलत रुकेगा. अगर आप आई एम श्योर आपके मन में बहुत सवाल हैं जिनके आंसर्स आप चाहते हैं. अगर आप सनी से बात करना चाहते हैं, हमारी लाइंस खुली हुई हैं, नंबर स्क्रीन पे हैं, आप हमें कॉल कर सकते हैं और सनी से बात कर सकते हैं. Sunny, I'm so sorry all this happened and the society failed you, and there's so many questions in my head, but I'll start with one. Firstly, आपके पेरेंट्स को पता था खान कैसा इंसान है, almost जानवर है. Did they ever lodge a formal complaint to the cops about him, or did they guide you? Because technically आप 18 थे, which is still a teen, लेकिन adulthood माना जाता है उसको. तो उन्होंने कभी गाइड किया और कभी आप पुलिस के पास गए? Was he ever caught?
He wasn't caught, but the police were very heavily involved. They were involved because of harassment. Khan kept calling the police on them because he kept referring to me as his wife.
Goodness.
So he was turning the tables and said that, they've got my wife. I want my wife back. So the police kept saying, we're filing it as a no crime. So then he would say, I'm getting harassed. So, the police were fed up at the end of the day. They said, we can't deal with your culture. This was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When now that obviously things are so much better, the police know about honour abuse, they know about so much more now. So, I'm really grateful for that. But at the time, my parents were like, just ignore it, he'll go away. Just ignore it, he'll go away. And I'm like, he's outside with a petrol and a lighter threatening to burn the house down. But they wouldn't listen. They said, he was twice my age. He was nearly 40 and I was 18. So he was a proper man,
yeah.
In terms of age. So I was still very naive. I was going to college. I didn't know, I couldn't deal with it. But my parents, no.
My God. वक्त एक छोटे से ब्रेक का है. जैसा कि #MeToo ने बताया कि सेक्सुअल असॉल्ट्स रोज़ाना ऑलमोस्ट हर औरत के साथ होते हैं. सैडली प्राइवेटली छोड़िए, पब्लिकली छोड़िए, हम उसके बारे में बात ही नहीं करते हैं क्योंकि वी जस्ट एक्सेप्टेड. लेकिन अगर आप ऐसी किसी भी सिचुएशन में, जैसे जो सनी ने व्हाट शी इज़ गॉन थ्रू, अगर ऐसी किसी भी सिचुएशन में आप हैं तो क्या कर सकते हैं? वील गेट दोज लर्निंग्स फ्रॉम सनी राइट आफ्टर द ब्रेक. सी यू.